In this insider-exclusive Justice in America Network TV special, Centerpoint Explosion Coverup, our investigative team sits down with Brent Coon to discuss not just the TPC explosion, but most importantly, the when, the why, and the how of Centerpoint's negligence, and especially how they and their lawyers have successfully delayed the case in hopes of not being held responsible for the massive destruction and injuries they caused to their victims. Here's Brent to give you an overview of what happened.
I'm Brent Coon. I'm lead counsel in the Centerpoint gas explosion case, which occurred in LaPorte, Texas on Thanksgiving weekend of 2022. I'm about to provide to you a PowerPoint presentation that walks you through most of the key issues in the case and the most important discovery aspects of the case to date. We're right now about a month out from trial. The case was filed in the days subsequent to the incident. The case landed in the Harris County District Court of the 333rd Judicial District in front of Judge Morris. Here's the basic things. When the incident happened, it was all over the news. All the area regional news media, television stations, and newspapers carried this because it's a horrific explosion. 911 calls were coming in from all over the area. First responders, fire departments, fire marshals, policemen, ambulances, helicopters, and all kinds of things were out. Nobody knew what happened or why it happened, but again, the whole house was completely engulfed as a result of a catastrophic explosion. What we found out shortly after this happened was that the gas in the house was a natural gas that exploded, and it was from one of the plaintiffs living in the house. Miss French lit a candle, and it caused the house to blow up. She did not know there was natural gas in the house. There was a smell in the house. So when she lit the candle, it blew the house up because the natural gas had been filtering in from a leaking pipe from Centerpoint on a main distribution line behind her property. She did not even have a gas meter at her home, nor did she have any gas appliances at her home. So the news covered all this, and what we found out was that it was a gas leak. The gas had migrated under the ground about 30 feet from where the gas line was running down a pipeline easement, and had been coming into her house up around the pipes that came down through the concrete and the slab. Interestingly, Centerpoint has taken three completely different defenses in the case as the case has developed. The first defense that they took, and I call this the evolution of defenses. The first defense that Centerpoint took in this case was that this was not a gas explosion. This was an incident that was a fire. It wasn't an explosion. It was a fire, and it wasn't caused by natural gas. It was caused by a defective electrical cord. In other words, there was an electrical short in the house from an electrical cord, and that's probably what caused the house to catch on fire. This was completely inconsistent with 100% of the evidence that was uncovered after the fact. There was no defective electrical cord. There was no fire. In fact, everybody now concedes this was an explosion. When the incident happened, as plaintiffs were able to testify to, it immediately consumed the whole rear of the house. It blew the roof down, the ceiling collapsed. It landed on our client. It landed on her dog and killed her dog. It blew her mother into the facilities in the master bedroom, bathroom, and knocked her out. So she has a brain injury as well as the concussive effects from the blast. And so all the evidence, ever since the day that this happened, from day one, Centerpoint was telling everyone that this was an electrical cord. And obviously, at the end of the day, as we are here today, 2 years later, nobody could argue with a straight face this was an electrical cord or that this was a fire. Everything in the case points to this being gas. The second defense they took, when that defense no longer worked for them, and it was clear that this was an explosion, it blew the brick veneer out and did all this other damage, was that maybe it wasn't their natural gas, maybe it was sewer gas from their home. So that was defense number two, and defense number one no longer held water. So for the next number of months in this case, Centerpoint has gone out and tried to claim that their natural gas did not get into this home, and it was mostly likely a sewer gas case. We'd already ruled out oxygen bottles, propane tanks, gas cans, and everything else because none of those were in the home. So now that we know it's a gas explosion, Centerpoint had one defense left at the time, which was, well, maybe it's some other kind of gas like sewer gas. So the only way that could happen is if there were sewer lines that were clogged up. So Centerpoint brought in a lot of experts, brought in cameras and everything else, went down into the sewer system. And we were able to conclusively prove that there was absolutely nothing wrong with the sewer system. And in fact, in the more recent depositions of Centerpoint managers, they've admitted that they ruled out sewer gas a long time ago as a cause. So that just leaves one source for this gas explosion. The only gas that could have gotten the house and caused it to explode was the gas from Centerpoint's gas line that was located right behind our plaintiff's home. So now that that is clearly the source and they can no longer argue these other issues, they're now saying, well, since it's our line and it was leaking, somebody else must have damaged our line. Never mind that there was a tree growing on top of their gas line at the time that had been there for 40 years. Never mind that the type of pipe that Centerpoint was utilizing for this was a defective type of pipe that had been known to crack very easily and had been taken off the market almost 40 years ago. And never mind the fact that there was gas found in the ground right next to our client's house and inside our other client's house at the time of this incident. So in spite of all those things, they've now said somebody else damaged our line. And they've tried to blame other people. The problem is in blaming other people, we've gone and deposed all of them, the contractors that ran other lines through the area. Nobody has any evidence of anybody doing anything anywhere near their pipe to have caused any damage to it. As importantly, Centerpoint in their internal documents admitted that this damage to this pipe was caused by a tree root. So now that we've gone through all three of their defenses for the last year and a half, 2 years, let me walk through each one about how we were able to disprove their defense. The first one was that Centerpoint said that this was a fire caused by an electrical cord, and it was not an explosion. So what we were able to show from that was that there was a timeline that Centerpoint had. And interestingly, when you walk through Centerpoint's own timeline of the day of the incident, even though they now say, well, this was an electrical cord case, is what they were saying very early on. While they were saying that to everybody, why were they even there? They were there because they knew the house blew up from their natural gas. They don't just show up at a fire at a house from an electrical cord. They showed up there because everything about what happened here, from all the radio reports and all the emergency responders, was clear that this was a gas explosion. They have a legal duty to go and investigate them if they're probable gas explosions to determine where the gas came from, if it was leaks of the natural gas system in the home or if it was a leak in their pipeline or whatever. So they're all out there. The technicians for Centerpoint are out there. Centerpoint's managers are out there. The very day this happened, interestingly, their lawyers are out there and their claims representatives are out there, which begets all sorts of questions, which is, if this was an electrical cord case, why are all your lawyers out there? Why are all your claims adjusters out there? Why are all your damage control people out there trying to mitigate this incident? And as I walk you through the other documents we found in the case, you will understand what Centerpoint was up to from day one. You walk through this 2 days of explanation of what happens from their own documents, and you can see lots of technicians came out and did lots of testing. Testing determined that there was a hot pipeline running, hot meaning containing their gas, running right behind these homes. They were able to determine that almost immediately. They then knew that their natural gas was in the area. So then they tested the houses next door. And what did they find in the houses next door? The house right next door to our client's house that blew up was full of Centerpoint's natural gas, as was determined by Centerpoint's own technicians that were there with Centerpoint's own equipment. So then Centerpoint knew the day of this incident that their natural gas was all in the next door neighbor's house and was probably what was in the house next door, being the house that blew up, and was probably the cause. So did they admit that then? No. What did they do instead? Instead, they went to try to find where the source of their gas leak was, which I'll go through in some other documents. The other thing they did, interestingly, was they told the people next door, the Garcia family, you have to evacuate your house. It's not safe to live in here right now because it can blow up. More interestingly, one of the technicians who speaks Spanish and talked to the Spanish, our client's wife who could speak Spanish, told her that this was their gas and that they needed to get out of the house and evacuate it, and they needed to go hire a lawyer. Now, this came from Centerpoint's own people. And of course, he also told them, please don't tell them I told you that because they'll fire me. So we have all that going on the day of the incident. So if you look at this timeline, it's very interesting because it walks you through from Centerpoint's standpoint who all the different personnel were that were out there and what they did to investigate the scene and what they found. Then you get into their reports. And very early on, these are all Centerpoint's own reports showing what's going on out there. This shows the map of the area, and it admits to identifying that they know that their gas line is out there. So now that they know that gas blew this house up and that gas is in the house next door, they scramble to try to find out where the leak is in their pipe. Well, it's no surprise they found that leak, and it was only 35 feet from the slab of both our house that blew up and Mr. Garcia's house next door where the gas was coming in. So when you walk through those documents, the next thing you see are the explanations from Ms. French. When she was deposed, she talked about, I was in the master bedroom. We were getting ready for our Thanksgiving meal. It was Saturday. The kids were all coming in. I'm in the back room with my mom. I smell something that just smells kind of stinky. I light a candle, a scented candle to mask it, and there was immediately a whoosh and a flame ball, and then the house blew up. So there was clearly nothing about that was anything consistent with an electrical cord sparking a fire that grew and grew and eventually consumed the house. So again, going through the depositions of the witnesses that were there, that also conclusively disproved that this was a fire. Obviously, if it was a fire from an electrical cord and they saw a fire developing in the house, they would have been able to get out, and it would have not been consistent with anything the plaintiffs described. Instead, it was an immediate flash and an immediate explosion. Ms. French was then taken to the hospital by Lifeline. This is a picture of her months later after she's still going through extensive debridement and after she's out of her coma. You can see horrific third burns over all of her lower extremities. She had second and third degree burns over many other parts of her body. She was in a coma for months. She has $2 million in medical expenses incurred to date. A horrific incident. It's a miracle she survived. As we said also, she was life flighted out, as was her mother, to the local burn centers. You listen to her mother's testimony, Miss Harkins. She was in the back of the house at the same time too. She was in the master bedroom and did not know what her daughter was doing at the time other than dressing in the master bedroom. But she's talking about how all of a sudden there was this sound, she just got pushed. Last thing she remembered was being pushed. That was a concussive explosion that pushed her and knocked her and hit her head on the floor and gave her massive concussion. And even today, she's still being treated for brain damage associated to that impact. Then again, she was horrifically burned. Here's pictures of her early on in her treatment at the burn center. You can see her entire face was consumed with second and third degree burns. She lost all of her hair. Both she and her daughter have gone through extensive skin debridement procedures and skin replacement. And for anybody that knows anything about that, they basically put you in saline tanks and they scrub you with Brillo pads. It's the most extraordinarily horrific, painful thing that anyone could go through. And they had to go through this for months. And even today, they still have chronic sores and other problems that need regular treatment and ointments and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, again, all these plaintiffs have been deposed. There's a lot of explanations about their injuries in there, about how they were almost, that they were literally walking through hell, the way that they were burned. Sometimes they wish they had not even survived. The pain was so excruciating. Those are the kinds of things that these two ladies went through just to survive this incident.
The central issue is that Centerpoint and most gas companies do not maintain their gas lines and right-of-ways. A large tree grew over the plastic line and ruptured it. The gas line was compromised as it was brittle. Moreover, the manufacturer, DuPont, had advised decades before that the pipe was subject to cracking and should be replaced. Many gas companies still have this pipe in thousands of miles of their lines. This type of failure has resulted in other home explosions and will continue to happen. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Houston, Texas. It is my great pleasure to introduce Brent Coon and Sid Robert to the show. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here again. Thanks.
Brent, tell us a little bit about your firm. What do you guys specialize in?
You know, we specialize in trial litigation, and it's the broad gamut of trial litigation. A lot of it's representing individuals. Some of it is organizational, some of it's corporate, but it's always on the side of someone or some entity that's been aggrieved, legitimately aggrieved, and wants to see that righted, and that's what we do.
I've noticed, because we've done other shows, that you take cases that are huge, cost a lot of money.
Millions and millions of dollars.
And it's almost like you're attracted to these challenges, right? You like it.
I do like it. You know, I'm a glutton for punishment sometimes, but you know, we've talked before off record about what it takes to be motivated and kick the adrenaline in from our personal experiences. And for me, it's always that challenge of taking on a formidable opponent. And you know, frankly, I think that most lawyers can handle the minor work. There are not many firms, there are not many lawyers that can handle the heavy lifting and do a good job. And we're not the only ones, but we're more of the rare breed. We're willing to put our money where our mouth is. We're willing to put millions of our own personal dollars, my personal dollars, back into a case to make sure that we help get someone that we're representing, someone who's been aggrieved or some company has been aggrieved, and make that right. And usually we're going against some company that did somebody dirty or some company dirty and deserves to be punished for it. Make restitution and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Now, Sid, we're here today talking about a case that both of you are involved with, Centerpoint explosion. Tell our audience a little bit about what happened.
Well, what happened was it took place on November 26, 2023, and it was daughter and mother. So Pam was the daughter to Patricia. They were preparing Thanksgiving luncheon because they were expecting family and friends from out of town. And essentially, they were preparing for this luncheon, and Pamela went to go light a candle, and the house exploded. And so as this is occurring, her son is driving up, and he rushes into the house, only to try to find his grandmother, who he was screaming for, and to find his mother. He got his mother out of the house. The grandmother had crawled out of the house because the walls had blown off the house. And so they were both life-flighted and, you know, in very bad condition for a long time. Pamela was in ICU, I believe, for about a month.
Now, this explosion injured not only them, but also the surrounding area, right?
Yes, you had the neighbors that had joined the house. They had damage to the sides of their home, the foundations of their home, and it was a real horrific incident, even for the neighbors and for the people that lived in the area to witness that.
Now, as you investigated the case, you discovered that the explosion was not caused by anything that they did, right?
Correct.
Caused by what and whom?
The explosion was happened and was caused by a gas main that was located behind the house that serviced one house in the neighborhood. The subdivision, for the most part, is all electric, but there was one house that wanted gas service. And so it was a gas line that ran behind Patricia Harkin's property.
Off her property.
Off of her property. And there was a crack that caused a leak, which incidentally caused gas to migrate under presumably their house and also under the neighbor's house. Centerpoint had spent many a day trying to extract gas from under the house of the neighbor of the Garcia's home.
Now, Centerpoint had been cautioned, warned by the manufacturer DuPont, right, that these pipes were brittle and they needed to be replaced, correct? Centerpoint didn't pay attention, did they?
No, they did not.
Okay, and that's the reason why this case happened, right?
Correct.
Okay, Brent, your clients were severely burned.
Almost killed.
Almost killed. Tell us the strategy that you took to pursue this case and the defense that Centerpoint put up.
Well, the strategy is always easy. The strategy is always to get to the bottom of it. Cut through all the red tape, find out what really happened. One of the things we try to do in all these cases is get to the scene before there's any destructive activity of the defendant or others. Preserve the crime scene, so to speak.
So let me ask you something. You know, in a criminal case you see on TV, they will tape off the area, correct? Civil cases, you can't exactly do that. So how do you try to preserve the area so that other people, as we talked on some other shows like the railroad cases, right, where they don't come up with their own people and alter the facts?
Well, in this case, they did alter the facts. And fortunately, we were on the scene early enough to have a good vision and a good understanding of the lay of the land and how everything was situated to start looking at scenarios that could have caused this explosion. We're all investigating early on. Why did this house blow up? This family did not have natural gas service to their home. It looked like a natural gas type explosion. You have to rule out everything else. We have older folks that live in the house, or any of them on oxygen. They have any kind of health issues. Were there propane bottles for gas grills? Was there anything else in the home that could have caused such a volatile explosion? We were able to rule all those things out, which then left us with the last scenario, which is somehow some sort of combustible gas leaked into this home. So where could it have come from if they don't even have a gas meter at their property and they don't have any natural gas in their home, nor do the neighbors on either side of them? So that's the first thing you have to start looking at once you've identified the lay of the land there, is start looking for your nearest sources. And there you have Centerpoint's gas line running right behind their fence line. And we see a tree being cut down right on that right-of-way, which tells me, from having done construction in the past, there's probably on this right-of-way a gas main. And it probably runs through this neighborhood and services somebody else somewhere else. But they wouldn't be cutting down a tree the day after this happened unless it's probably sitting on top of their gas line that they need to get to. And that was the tip that we had very early on in the case from our own personal observations out there that clued us in. And once we found that out, we were able to go back to Centerpoint and say, why are we all cutting a tree down behind that house? And they go, what tree? What tree? What tree? Well, just routine maintenance. And so anyway, long story short, from there, we were able to go back. They did have to keep their photographic record of their repairs and replacement. We were able to ascertain that they cut the tree down because they found out their gas line was running right under that tree, and that the massive root ball of that tree had cracked that brittle pipe, and it had caused it to leak for some significant period of time. And unfortunately, when you have leaks in that type of soil, it doesn't come straight to the surface. That pipe's several feet down. And what it did do, which commonly happens in this business, is that gas migrates subsoil, stays underground, and goes to the nearest point through the cracks and fissures in the soil to find a place up. And unfortunately, in this case, the place that it came up was under the slabs of the homes where their piping went in from their toilets and other drain pipes. The gas came in around those, up through their slabs, into their homes. And now it's in the homes. The roofs capture all that. So that gas comes in and eventually gets to a concentration that becomes combustible. And that's what tragically happened in this case.
From what you're saying, there's other dangers lurking out there, aren't there?
There's dangers everywhere. And from doing this 40 years, it's a wonder anybody's alive, particularly in petrochemical industry areas, because there are so many places that are just ripe for something horrific to happen. This is a perfect example of something that could happen anywhere, any other time, in the blink of an eye, even if you don't have natural gas. And we have found out in our investigation into this case that the pipe that cracked here was already recalled by the manufacturer decades before.
Sure, DuPont.
Actually installed after the ban had gone in place. This was old pipe that shouldn't even been in the warehouse anymore, but they went ahead and used it in spite of the problem that it had already been replaced with a pipe that was purportedly less brittle and less subject to this problem. And they have it in many, many thousands of miles of their lines today, as do many of the other people in the gas industry. And what we've done here and what we have found out is just part of the evidence that Congress is now using to look at a mandate that all this pipe come back out.
In other words, whether it's in open territory or not, they have to fix it.
The reality that if you don't, it's going to keep happening.
So in your discovery, you discovered all of this. You're going to go to trial.
We did.
You share all of your information with them, correct?
We did. It went all the way up to trial. Unfortunately, to avoid the trial, we were finally able to get a settlement.
Prior to going to trial?
Just before trial.
They knew they were dead in the water.
They knew by then. The lies and cover-ups that Centerpoint engaged in from the very day this happened were unconscionable. We know that the day that...
Besides cutting the tree down, what other lies?
Well, we know, for example, we know that the day this happened, even though there's no gas running to that property, Centerpoint's on their property. Now, why is Centerpoint out here? It's not a customer of theirs. Why would they be out there in the first place? Why were there claims adjusters there? Why were there lawyers there? Why were there experts?
Guilt.
I think they knew as soon as it blew up that they were having problems, and they knew to show up out there. And they did show up out there. And what we know when they did show up out there is they started lying. And you know who they started lying to? They started lying to the other investigative teams that work for the city and the state. The city and the state, when you have an explosion like this, and the house burns down and the whole neighborhood could be impacted, the first thing that the investigative authorities have to do is like, what happened here? And can anything else blow up? There's something going on here that puts the whole town at risk? They don't know. So in addition to the fire department and others coming out, and first responders and rescues and life flights, all the other people out there, you had the representative of the fire marshal's office. They're not in charge of putting out the fire. They're in charge of determining what caused the fire, what caused the explosion. You have the Texas Railroad Commission. It has state authority over the investigation into the causation of all these issues. Their investigators are there. And what is being told to them? Centerpoint's own agents and their own investigators are telling both of them that this was due to things unrelated to their gas.
Like, what could that be?
There were all kinds of rumors out there, but the rumor that stuck most was that this was determined to be an electrical fire. It wasn't even an explosion. Now, that's against all the facts. This wasn't an electrical fire that caught the curtains on fire and then slowly consumed the house. This was one where somebody lit a candle and the whole house blew up and the roof blew off and the house caved in. The animals in the house were killed from the crush. The walls blew out, and one of the survivors was able to escape the house because there was a big hole in the wall that they could go through. So everything descriptively said this was not a casual fire that got out of control. This was a major explosion. In spite of those facts, Centerpoint's own agents were deliberately lying to the state and local regulators and investigators, telling them that it had been determined already that day that it was electrical. So for example, they went to the Railroad Commission investigator and says, this was electrical. And he said, why do you say that? It's because the fire marshal already came out here and did their investigation today and said it was electrical. So the Railroad Commission goes, okay, well, I don't need to do any more because they've already completed the investigation. That's the determination. So then they go to the fire marshal and say, you can just put it as electrical. Well, based on what? Because the Railroad Commission has already determined. And it shows you, unfortunately, the incompetence of our own government investigators.
Did anybody other than you do an investigation to find out the cause of it?
No, if we would not have stepped in the day after this happened, they would have got away scot-free. You'd have had two major governmental reports out there saying that this was an electrical fire. And these victims would have never done anything, never known better. They did survive. They would have eventually been able to return to their home, well, not to that home since it burned up, blew up, burned to the ground, but they'd eventually return to a life where it had been determined by authorities that somehow an electrical cause was associated to this explosion. And that's just what they would believe because that's what they would have been told the reports were. Ironically, and just disappointingly, the fire marshal never asked Centerpoint to corroborate what the Railroad Commission allegedly said, nor did the Railroad Authority, Texas Railroad Commission, ask Centerpoint to corroborate what the fire marshal said. These guys are a phone call away from each other, and all they had to do is say, hey, we talked to Centerpoint, they said you determined this, can we see a copy of your report? Because their own independent reports, to the extent they did anything out there, never made that determination. They just relied on what Centerpoint said their determinations were to then leave it at that cause. And that was how they did their damage control. The scary thing is in this case, we caught them red-handed doing that here. Red-handed. The question is, how many other times has Centerpoint and other gas companies done this when the lawyers for the victim were not able to get out there quick enough to do something about it and conduct their own investigation and catch them red-handed?
Lucky you did. Do you have a team of investigators, or do you and yourself? Do you guys go out there and investigate yourself?
We do. We have, I go out on a case like this. I like to get out there personally for lots of reasons. Again, one, just the experience from being in the field, looking for things that many people may not even be knowing to look for. The other was I did have a construction background, so I know a lot more about some of these issues than the general lay public. I worked for a utility for a period of time, so I have a better hands-on experience there. But we immediately also grab the people that we know are authorities in that area. So we brought in our own fire causation, explosion causation expert the day after. We retained some of the foremost authorities in the country on pipeline safety and the issues associated with these defective pipes. So we arm ourselves with the best people in the field.
Big question is pipeline security and safety. Has it changed?
Pipeline safety and security is non-existent. It's self-regulated.
This is going to happen again.
Oh yeah, it's happened before this, and it'll continue to happen. And it'll happen for lots of reasons. The main reason it happens is because it's generally unregulated, it's self-reporting. We know that Centerpoint and other utilities know that they have tens of thousands of miles of this pipe that has already been determined by the product manufacturer to be defective and should be pulled out, and they're not doing it. And the only reason they're not doing it is because it's cost prohibitive. They do the way. How much is it going to cost to pay these people that blow up when we got a leak in the line and it leaks over their house and blows them up? How much we have to pay them versus how much it's going to cost to replace it all? And that's a risk analysis that they all do. And that risk analysis weighs in their favor even more when they say, most of the time we blow these people up, they'll never know what caused it because we'll run out there and cover up our track, which we know they do because we caught them doing it.
Right, caught them red-handed. We have with us today your clients, Pamela French and Patricia Harkin, right? So let's bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Patty Harkins and Pamela French to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I am so glad you are here today. I saw both of your photos, and we're showing them right now. And I just couldn't imagine anybody going through what you went through. I saw the photo of your face. It couldn't have been redder. You know, tell us that experience. When the explosion happened, were you knocked out?
Yes.
You were. So you were unconscious. And then the next thing you realized you were in a hospital probably.
The first thing that came to mind was my house exploded. And
You knew that.
well, I didn't at the time. I didn't know what had happened. What happened was my house exploded. I happened to be between my bedroom and my bathroom. And when my house exploded, my bedroom ceiling came down on top of me. In other words, my bedroom just literally collapsed on top of me. But the miracle of that story is not one nail or board touched me. And what I realized later, that I was unconscious. I had hit my head on the floor. I got a traumatic brain injury. And I could hear my grandson yelling, "Gamma, Gamma, where are you? Where are you?" And I kind of came to and realized there's boards around me. So I saw an opening. I crawled out from underneath my ceiling and I stood up and I was like, where's my house?
Weren't you hurting too?
No. And now, you know, that's the one thing I now realize what shock is.
Because you were in shock. You didn't realize it.
I hadn't gotten to the pain part. I looked down and my hands were bloody. My feet, I was barefooted. My feet were bloody. And I was looking around like, where's my house? Because I could see my back fence. The rest of my house was gone. Mm-hmm. And my grandson was yelling because the house was starting to catch on fire, what was left of it. He said, "Gamma, Gamma, go to your left." And he said, "Brett's there. He's going to help you get out." So I walked, and this is another miracle. I had a white brick house. The brick was like a road that led to the ambulance, and it was so, and that was the one thing I looked and I thought, I've never seen my brick so white. It was just as white as could be. And I walked out there and out on the brick, and when I got close to where the brick end of the yard started, my neighbor was there, and he and his son helped me get to the ambulance.
You walked to the ambulance?
Yes. Here again, I'm in shock. I'm not feeling any pain. I'm not registering what's happened. I just know my house is gone, and I'm like, I'm not understanding what's going on. And so they sat me on the bumper of the ambulance, and they were working on her. And they put her in the ambulance, and she was yelling and screaming, "Where's my son? Where's my son?" And they kept saying, "We've got to take you. We've got to take you." And she said, "No, I'm not going." She was holding her feet against the door. And finally, my grandson answered, and so they said, "Well, your ambulance is here." So they walked me to mine, and they took her. And that's the last thing I remember. I remember them. I don't remember opening my eyes, but in the life light, the EMT that was doing the life light for me, he said, "I'm going to put headphones on you. Is it okay?" And I went, he said, we're life lighting you. And I'm like, because I didn't know where it was. And he said, I'm life lighting you. We need to put these headphones on because it's so noisy in the plane. And I said, okay. I said, my husband and I used to own a plane. And then I really don't remember anything past that for about over a week. It was over a week because I was in intensive care. They kept telling my granddaughter that they didn't know because of my age if I was going to make it, and because she was burned so much worse than me, they said we're going day by day. Well, I didn't know that. I was out, but I don't remember anything for about a week.
What about yourself, Pamela?
We were having our Thanksgiving this Saturday after Thanksgiving. So I've been making potato salad, and I lit a candle. I still smelled egg smell. And our house was a 100% electric house. I was living with my mom at the time because I had just gotten over breast cancer. And we had a 100% electric house, and I lit a candle and the house exploded. And so it didn't knock me forward, back, or side to side because the house literally caved in all around me. And I started screaming. There was like a flash of fire in front of my face. And when the fire had dissipated, I could see the outside of the house, the fence and everything. And I freaked out, obviously, and my son had just pulled up, and when I started screaming, he came in and got me, helped me outside. They laid me on the front lawn, and I remember somebody leaning over me saying, we're going to help you. I'm going to put a blanket over you so you don't go into shock. And the blanket hurt so bad. I, at this point, did not know I was burned. Yeah. And then the next thing I know, I wake up, I was conscious in the ambulance, and they told my mother that she needed to go to her ambulance and they needed to start working on me. And I, like she said, I had my feet up against the door, and I was like, I had sent my son back in to get my dog. And I was like, I'm not leaving until I know my son is okay. And so I started calling out to him, and they finally said, he's here. And I moved my feet back from the door where I had been pushing it open. And the last thing I remember is going really, really cold, and them saying, we have to intubate, she's crashing, life flight's 2 minutes out, let's go. And then I woke up about a week later at Memorial Hermann and did not even know I was burned. My longtime friend, who is an attorney, Brooks Harrison, was in my hospital room, and my daughter and my brother and my son, and they started explaining to me what had happened. And there's no mirrors in the burn unit at Memorial Hermann in ICU. I spent...
Specifically for that reason?
For that reason, so you don't know. I spent a month in Memorial Hermann ICU, and then I went to a private hospital where I spent the greater part of 6 months and over 20 surgeries to get me to where I am today.
A lot of skin grafts.
Every day they did debridements, and that is the most painful thing a human can endure.
Prevent infection.
And to rejuvenate your skin. And I had surgery every Tuesday while I was in Memorial, and then they did debridements every single day.
It was primarily on your legs, was it not?
They have specialized nurses there, and each one would take an arm, and each one would take a leg, and they would do the debridement, and it lasted about 2.5 hours. And it is the most painful thing a human can endure.
What do they do exactly?
They scrub your skin off, and to where it's a layer of skin underneath there. They literally peel all your skin off of you.
And the purpose of that is for what?
To let your new skin rejuvenate. And then they put a layer of synthetic skin on you, and then they bandage you up. And they do this every day.
Did they give you some sort of pain medicine while this?
Yes, they would bring. I was in a medically induced coma for a while, and then they had to bring me out of it. My organs were failing, and so they put me in a twilight sleep, and they'd bring me out of the twilight sleep to do these procedures on me, and they would give me a cocktail of fentanyl, Oxycontin, Norco, Demerol, and ketamine. And they give it to you before, during, and after the procedure, but then they give you a shot to take the high away so you didn't become addicted to it, which also took half the pain medicine away. And so you felt every bit of it. Yeah. And it was excruciatingly painful, and it lasted a very long time.
And that they did the same thing with you too, right, Patty?
They also do your face. They have a girl that does your face, and both of us, of course, they shaved my head. They ended up shaving hers too, because mine was even my scalp. So there's actually 5 that's all they do. But I will say this, thanks to them, our skin, although we endured it and it's horrible, we have, our skin is much better healed this couple years later, having gone through that process. And we had really good burn doctors and really good therapists in the rehab center. So without them, I don't think we still have problems. We will have problems for the rest of our lives. We can't do sun because when you're burned as bad as we are, you lose layers of skin. Our bodies don't regulate temperatures, so I may be extremely cold, she may be extremely hot. Your body doesn't regulate anymore the way it used to when you've been burned like we have. The scars are there to remind you what all you've been through, so it's hard. Mm-hmm. Even reliving it is hard.
So both of you go for like regular checkups?
Correct.
Treatment?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think about the job that Brent Coon and his firm did for you?
I can't thank them enough. Like I said before, Brooks has been a friend of mine since high school, and when this first happened, my daughter was one of the first people she called was him. And he brought in an amazing team, and they did an amazing job, and I cannot thank them enough. They are just good people and good friends, and the research and the compassion that they had is just unmistakably great.
Well, thank God they are that way, right? Because the Centerpoint was absolutely lying every step of the way.
Exactly. People don't realize that you need a carbon monoxide monitor, because I was an all-electric house. I would have never suspected that my house would blow up from gas. And it's just very important. Like I said, you have a smoke detector, you need a carbon monoxide monitor too, because that's just as important. Had we had one working, this would have been detected way before the explosion. And it bothers us that elementary school has all that gas going up around it, and they've dug up several pipes around that school, because there's probably 200 kids in that elementary school.
Anything else you want to add, Pamela?
No, just the importance, like she said, being from the oil and gas industry, I was telling her that I thought we were being carbon monoxide poisoned, and she was like, that's silly, you live in a 100% electric house, you never know. And that is the one thing that I'm a very big advocate now, yes, that even if you live in a 100% electric house, have carbon monoxide testers in your home, because a lot of times the gas companies, they inherit the lines, and if they're not a money producing line, they don't know that they have them either.
Right. Well, I want to thank both of you spending your very valuable time with us, and thank God, you survived this, and to tell your story.
We are walking miracles.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing, Brent. All of your cases show the necessity for change about the way things are done. Is anybody doing anything right now, legislatively or anything, for companies like Centerpoint who are not bearing the responsibility of the safety to the neighbors and the areas that they have their pipes running through?
There's some hope. Normally there's very little hope, but in this case, the hope comes from the fact that in Pennsylvania, after this explosion, there was another tragic explosion, similar facts and circumstances that involved some progressive and proactive congressmen from that region that have taken this issue to Washington. So we're cautiously optimistic that as a result of this happening in the backyard of people who have some authority in Washington to make it an issue, that they're doing so. We're certainly still working with our clients to join ranks with them and anyone else we can. We're also still working behind the scenes to try to help build up a better book of evidence of the other times this has happened. I'm aware of other lawyers that have had some case similar to this, and now that they know about ours and it's been more publicly known, we're getting the occasional call from, like, we had a case kind of like this. So we're putting together a repository of the other sets of circumstances where we were fortunate enough to see a good lawyer step in for people where they couldn't cover the tracks at the gas company and bring it to their attention. Now, the reality is utility companies are a multi-trillion-dollar enterprise. Biggest enterprise in the world is the energy sector. And the gas companies and the distribution systems and the retailers and the wholesalers have enormous influence in our politics. I mean, the reality is the people that got the money make the rules. And that's the lobbying effect, that's the financial support. Our Supreme Court's already said anybody can give as much money as they want to anybody, so there's no limits. And the people that go buy the influence are the people that have the money. And the people that have the money are utility companies, and those like them. So we do have to fight that much bigger battle with much less resources. And the times we do win, it's not because we out-resource them and outspend them. It's just because we're right and they're wrong.
Right, right. Well, congratulations on settling the case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.